Yes, let's make a summary. So basically, I think that you have like a common understanding what is autism, what is a spectrum, Asperger. Those are the terms that people use like very intuitively to discuss some topics. But generally, the spectrum of autism is a condition of our brain that affects how people think and how people feel, and especially how people interact with other people. So it is also connected how they experience the environment around them, the sounds, all the input. But for some people, it is not a kind of a disease or a disorder. They like to see it more as an atypical brain organization or neurodiversity. The important thing to know is that autism is not this kind of a spectrum, that you could be more autistic or less autistic. It's more, it looks more like this. So there are different dimensions of it and different traits, different aspects of it. So the conclusion is that there are a lot of pictures of people within the spectrum of autism. So we cannot really compare people like they are more autistic or less autistic, because each one of us can have a different picture of how our brain is working. From a medical point of view, there used to be this classification of diseases, so called DSM-4, but now there was an update of it. So we have a DSM-5, which was a kind of a revolution in seeing the spectrum of autism. So that's why I started using Asperger or autism. But right now, as of the DSM-5, we should not be talking about Asperger syndrome anymore. There is no such thing. All the things that we are discussing are in a spectrum of autism. So basically there are 3 levels of this spectrum. Level 1 is a level that requires support of other people. This person requires support of other people when dealing in a normal life. Level 2 is a kind of a middle level. This person requires a substantial support. And level 3 is very substantial support. So this is a different kind of seeing spectrum of autism, because it is not possible to tell that somebody is more autistic and somebody is less autistic, for example, as only Asperger's syndrome. To diagnose autism spectrum disorder, it is basically necessary that this person shows a kind of an impairment in social communication and interaction. And the second thing is that people within spectrum have kind of restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior. Sometimes we can discuss the third thing, which is the language impairment. But generally, those 2 aspects, like social communication and interaction and patterns of behavior, are necessary to diagnose autism. If you have any questions when we talk, just feel free to pop in and ask those questions. If you have any comment or any remark, just do it. It should be a kind of a discussion. Let me click to the other one.
Oh. Yeah, I will just take it from here. Maybe I will just actually stop sharing for a second, because what I wanted to say is that there is, if you just Google conversations that people have about autism spectrum and software development, you will see that there is this idea that is circulating in the community that those 2 things are somehow related. And it's that software industry is somehow pulling people who are in the spectrum, but I think it's the other way around. So if you read what people write, people from the spectrum who write, who share their experience, they often have difficulties with keeping their job. They change jobs frequently, mainly because of the difficulty that they have with social interactions. And when you are a software engineer, on the other hand, it often means that you are being obsessed about order, about syntax. Most often you interact with other people through code, and that requires literal interpretation of it. Your deep knowledge of some field is often rewarded because you become a go-to person in selected areas of the code. And it's not easy to find good numbers that would, or any numbers that would back up or disprove the theory that the software development and autism is somewhere connected. But if you look at the WHO data that I will share, they suggest that autism is roughly 1% of the world population. In the US, when they did the study, they came up with 2.3% of the population. And the only data that I found that would talk about autism spectrum in software development, that was the Stack Overflow questionnaire that they did. And when you look here, it's 3.7% of people that participated that are somewhere in the spectrum. What is interesting for me is that in the same survey, you can see that there are people with other challenges like mood or anxiety disorder. So when you look at those numbers, the chances of you having a person with any of those characteristics in your Scrum team are quite high. And I think you should know how to handle those situations. So for example, how to facilitate Scrum events for people in the spectrum or with any of those challenges, or you should know how to be a better change agent in that context. So that's why I think it's a very useful approach to this.
Because I just wanted to mention that this this survey was made in 2019, and the numbers were quite different. I'm just still talking about the Stack Overflow, and the number of people saying I have autism in 2019 was 2.6. So we can see that it is growing. It doesn't mean that it's actually growing, but maybe people are more aware of it. Christine, you wanted to ask a question?
Yeah, just out of curiosity, do you limit neurodiversity to autism in the spectrum, or?
No. It is also connected to other states or ways that the brain works. For example, ADHD, yeah. And what is interesting for me is that it is always a spectrum. So Pawel already said that it is connected to some other difficulties, like for example, OCD, yes, obsessive compulsive disorder. So basically, if you can notice that you have OCD, you actually never know if it is somehow connected to autism, to the spectrum. Because we as people, we like to have, you know, some folders, and we like to label people, and we just really need to know, okay, this person is OCD, this person is autism. But in fact, in real life, it doesn't work this way. It is a unique constellation of how the brain works in each and every individual. So we would like to put labels on people, but it's not really possible. So I always imagine a person, an individual, as a let's say, as a constellation of different aspects, let's say. Just wanted to tell you about the last research that you can see in left bottom. It is showing that basically they just made a comparison between 3 different cities in Dutch cities, yes, and something strange came up. It shows that in Eindhoven, people with within the spectrum of autism, sorry, not yes, people, but like high school people, they are higher in this rate of spectrum. And what was the conclusion is that Eindhoven is a place where there is a lot of IT companies, there is a lot of people that do this kind of a job. So the discussion after this research was really interesting, that, for example, the traits of the parents or the way that they behave or something else, the genes influence this young people in a way that they are clearly higher. You can see it here on the graph. It is clearly higher than with other disorders. So you have their ADHD and autistic disorder understood as a severe autistic disorder. But only this one, the spectrum is much, much higher.